2 hours ago, the White House crossed a threshold that changes everything. President Trump signed an emergency directive targeting the financial architecture of America's closest ally. Not tariffs, not trade restrictions, a calculated strike at the banking system itself. Canadian government assets held inside American financial institutions are now frozen. Canadian banks have been locked out of the dollar clearing system that underpins virtually every international trade payment on Earth. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called it necessary pressure. The reality is something far more aggressive. This is the financial playbook reserved for adversaries. Iran, North Korea, Russia. It has never been used against a G7 partner. Until today. The directive carries 3 immediate consequences. First, the Royal Bank of Canada, TD Bank, and Scotiabank, institutions managing over $4 trillion in assets, can no longer process dollar transactions through American correspondent banks without explicit Treasury authorization. Second, Canadian sovereign investment vehicles holding over $200 billion in American infrastructure face immediate review and potential forced liquidation. Third, Canadian dollar exchange operations in New York face a 72-hour suspension, sending the loonie into its sharpest intraday drop since 2008 within minutes of the announcement. The White House assumption was straightforward. You cannot run a modern economy without dollar access. Every country cut off from American financial systems has eventually broken. Cuba waited decades. Iran is still waiting. Canada, with 75% of its exports flowing south, was supposed to last weeks. Senior officials expected the phones to start ringing from Ottawa within hours. What they did not expect was that Mark Carney had been working on his answer for 11 months. Before we get into what Carney actually did, if you are finding this coverage valuable, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It genuinely helps the channel. Now, here is what happened. Documents obtained by the Financial Post reveal that what Canada announced today was not assembled overnight. It has a name inside the Bank of Canada. Operation Northern Shield. The framework was drafted last spring, stress-tested through the summer, and quietly activated over the past 3 months. 40 minutes after Trump's directive became public, Carney walked to the podium at the Bank of Canada's Ottawa headquarters. Not Parliament. The central bank. This was not politics. This was monetary architecture. He opened with one sentence that stopped trading floors across 3 continents. The United States has chosen to weaponize the dollar against an ally. We have spent 11 months ensuring that weapon cannot reach us. Then he laid out 4 countermoves, each one more structurally significant than the last. First, the Bank of Canada has activated emergency swap agreements with the European Central Bank and the central banks of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Canadian banks can now clear transactions in euros and dirhams, bypassing the dollar system for trade flows covering over 60% of Canada's export volume. The ECB confirmed the arrangement within the hour. Frankfurt was already processing Canadian institutional flows before Carney finished speaking. Second, all Canadian crude oil and natural gas contracts newly signed with international buyers will be priced in a basket currency mechanism: euros, British pounds, Japanese yen, and Canadian dollars. No US dollars. This is the most direct challenge to petrodollar convention in 50 years. It plants the seed in the one market where dollar pricing has been considered untouchable. Third, and this is where the Toronto Star's reporting becomes critical, Canada has reclassified energy flows to the American Northeast under domestic supply priority review. Hydroelectric power from Quebec and Ontario keeping the lights on across New York State and New England is now subject to what officials are calling scheduled infrastructure maintenance on 3 major transmission corridors. Sources inside the Canadian energy regulator described it differently. It is a controlled, strategic reduction. The New York City Mayor's office placed an emergency call to Ottawa at 9:14 this morning. The message, according to 2 sources briefed on the exchange, was direct. Do not turn off New York. The fourth move is the one nobody anticipated. At every major border crossing, customs officers have been issued new inspection protocols for American-manufactured technology products entering Canada. Server components, semiconductors, networking hardware, all now subject to timelines adding between 18 and 36 hours per shipment. No executive order, no formal declaration, paperwork, and it is surgical. Carney closed without taking questions. The room stayed silent for 10 seconds before anyone moved. The market reaction was immediate and brutal, in exactly the wrong places for Washington. The US dollar fell 1.9% against the euro within 40 minutes. American bank stocks dropped sharply. Treasury yields spiked as foreign sovereign buyers pulled back. Canadian equities rallied. The Toronto Stock Exchange's energy index closed the morning up 6.2%. What makes this moment significant is not any single countermove. It is the architecture beneath all of them. The swap agreements, the basket currency framework, the border protocols, none of it was improvised. Every element was prepared, legally reviewed, and held in reserve for exactly this moment. A senior Financial Post source put it plainly. Carney did not build the shield when the attack came. He built it first, and then waited. The American business community understood the implications faster than the White House did. A J.P. Morgan internal note warned that the moment the United States locks a G7 ally out of dollar clearing, every sovereign wealth fund on Earth asks one question. Are we next? Japan holds $1.1 trillion in American treasuries. The Gulf states hold another $800 billion. The Chamber of Commerce called the directive the most self-defeating executive action in living memory. 6 Republican senators on the Finance Committee demanded immediate suspension. These are not opposition voices. These are the administration's own coalition. The ECB's confirmation of the swap framework was a political statement. The Bank of England signaled readiness to extend equivalent arrangements. The Gulf states said nothing, which in diplomatic terms means they said everything. Trump now faces 3 paths, and none lead where he intended. Enforce the directive and watch the northeastern power grid enter controlled reduction, American refineries scramble, and the dollar's reserve status erode in real time. Reverse it and hand Carney the most complete diplomatic victory in Canadian history. Admitting the most aggressive financial tool in America's arsenal moved Canada by exactly 0 inches. Or escalate further against a country that spent a year preparing for escalation, with allies watching and markets already pricing something permanent. Carney's terms are clear. Full rescission before any conversation begins. Trump must publicly retreat before he gets a seat at the table. 2 hours ago, the White House believed it had found Canada's breaking point. 2 hours later, it is discovering the breaking point was never there. What was there instead was a plan, 11 months in the making, built by a man who has run the central banks of 2 G7 nations. Trump wanted submission. He activated a counter-architecture that was already built and waiting. He wanted to show that no ally defies America without cost. He proved the cost falls hardest on the country making the threat. He wanted darkness in Ottawa. He may have brought it to New York instead.